Alright y'all, so today I wanted to make a very quick video to give you my thoughts and kind of tell the story of a cancelled KSI drone that we could have gotten in Transformers Age of Extinction, which would have been going by the name WidowMaker or Widow. And just kind of wanted to talk about this lost and scrapped Transformer that we could have seen in the movie, which obviously didn't happen, and we eventually got Stinger in her place. So, to give you a little bit of background, especially when it comes to like film production, most of the time, especially with like Transformer movies, the concept art is one of the very first things that's done. You know, they usually hire freelance artists, and they usually craft concept art and designs for a movie. Either one, the script's already done, or two, the script is currently in a stage of development that concept art can be made for it. And this was the case for Transformers Age of Extinction. By 2012, they were already working on and crafting the movie, designing the visual look of the movie. Concept art was done. And this is where kind of this interesting piece of concept art for a character called WidowMaker, which had concept art done by Steve Jung and another artist, I can't remember his name, Beotriv or something along those lines. They were freelance artists, and they were working on the concept art for various pieces for Transformers Age of Extinction. Either one of them, they both did concept art for this character, but eventually they created a character, a Decepticon, kind of like in terms of like Stinger's role in the movie, called WidowMaker. Now, it seemed like at some point in the early development and script of Age of Extinction that Stinger, the character that would become Stinger, would be a KSI drone, some kind of villain that would rival Bumblebee, right? That was the primary idea. Now, most of the time, especially with concept art, especially in the Transformers movies, a lot of concept art, they just kind of throw everything at the wall to see what sticks. Tons of concept art for those movies end up wildly different from the final product. And that's just because they're kind of throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. And it seemed like, they probably were told by Paramount or the studio or Hasbro or maybe even Michael Bay that they wanted to craft a KSI, some kind of villain to maybe rival Bumblebee or at least rival one of the Autobots in the movie for the new team. Because it seemed like maybe it was confirmed the lineup, like Crosshairs, Drift, Hound, Bumblebee, Optimus. That was pretty much the core lineup of that movie. So they basically like have the KSI drone or some kind of villain that would rival one of them. And that is, of course, when one of them crafted the idea of WidowMaker. Now, WidowMaker is this kind of very feminine, red and black, sleek-looking Transformer that's got a very obviously widows, black widows. The spiders are very deadly, so it's got a very deadly-esque look to it. And there's like various designs of it. And her weapons would have been either blasters on her arms, or she could have had some kind of machine gun as like a tail. That was kind of like shown off in some pieces of concept art. And she would have transformed into the vehicle, the Pagadi Hurum, if I'm saying the last name correctly. And what this was basically Stinger's alt mode in the final product. It was basically a concept car that was brought in when they were shooting the film in Hong Kong. And there was like tons of speculation online, like what Decepticon or what KSI drone is going to get this vehicle alt mode. And a lot of people were speculating, over the years, like who's this could be, and ended up really just being Stinger at the end of the day. But this was a pretty interesting, it was a very high concept car, very nice. There was only like a few prototypes of the car made back in 2012. I think another wave wasn't made until 2017, and obviously, it's a very rich, very nice car. And this was basically the alt mode initially for WidowMaker. As I see in a lot of concept art, the designers used pieces of the vehicle in her look, kind of like a red and black aesthetic and color scheme going throughout a lot of the concept art and designs. That's because, like I said, her alt mode was supposed to be that vehicle. There's various concept art too, as you can see. They're kind of trying out different things. Obviously, her shape is very feminine. You don't see a lot of feminine Transformers in Michael Bay, his movies and stuff, which obviously, I think it's one of the reasons why Widowmaker has withstand and kind of became a semi-popular thing in the Transformers community for so long, just because of the fact that she is like a feminine Transformer. You don't see those a lot, especially in design wise, and I think she looks great. I really like her design. They kind of went through different stages. As you can see, the one in the center for my thumbnail of the video, she kind of has like braids, which is kind of like a weird thing. Her face went through different sculpts as well. On the bottom right, she's kind of facing off against an early version of Drift from Transformers Age of Extinction. So maybe Widowmaker and Drift were going to be arch enemies in the movie instead of Widowmaker and Bumblebee. So that, like I said, all potential ideas, and a lot of this concept art is kind of dated the late 2012. So they were just all trying out various different things and styles, seeing what really stuck. There's also like different face models. I think another concept artist did a version of her where she's much more mechanical looking with more red. Her face too kind of reminds me of like a helmet in a way, but it looks really cool. So there was some cool pieces of concept art, and it sounded like this character did make it a little bit far early in pre-production, but it sounded like Paramount, Hasbro, whoever up the chain saw this piece of artwork and decided to cut Widowmaker from the movie. Now, if this character went any further than the pre-production concept art phase, I think it would have had to change either way. Just because, number one, the name, Widowmaker. Now, this name was actually trademarked already by the Blizzard, who were making a game at the time that would eventually become Overwatch in 2016. And they have another character in that game that's called Widowmaker. So they couldn't. So even if this character made it further along in the Age of Extinction production pipeline, they would have had to change the name. That's why, I'll get to it later, but when they eventually did make a figure based on her, they had to change the name to Widow because they couldn't use Widowmaker. And also, I think in general, it might have looked a little bit bad on Hasbro and Paramount and Bay just because the term Widowmaker is kind of a term associated with heart attacks, so they may have not used it either way. So, like I said, just kind of throwing things out there. But that was another hurdle in her development, and it seemed like, people higher up just weren't really getting Widowmaker's design. They weren't really going crazy for it, and eventually they decided to scrap the whole design altogether. Now, the vehicle alt mode obviously wasn't scrapped. They would repurpose that alt mode into a new character that would eventually become Stinger, who became the rival to Bumblebee in Transformers Age of Extinction. And I think that's pretty much what they wanted from the beginning. They wanted some kind of rival, and they felt maybe instead of doing it the Drift or some other characters, to Bumblebee would make a little bit more sense. And obviously, it would form the character of Stinger in the final product. Now, Widowmaker, despite being a scrapped concept, there's been some kind of theories. Maybe she was part of the KSI drone assault and Transformers Age of Extinction. And the idea kind of languished over the years. This piece of concept art and stuff that floated around the internet. People really liked it. And eventually, it eventually made it into an actual figure because lately Hasbro has been making a lot of studio concept figures for Transformers based on like famous pieces of concept art and cut characters from the movies and animated shows and stuff. And Widowmaker was definitely one of those being talked about, and eventually did get a figure released in 2025. Now, they had to change a lot of things to make this figure work. For example, she has a different alt mode. She's not the Bugatti Chiron that was Stinger's alt mode, so they changed it to a McLaren, which, to be fair, I think there might have been a McLaren. I think McLaren was the alt mode maybe for Hot Rod, but I could be mistaken. But that was basically her new alt mode, And they also had to rename the figure to Widow because Widowmaker was already trademarked by Blizzard. Also, another feature they had to add was kind of changing up some of the kibble, so it doesn't look exactly as sleek and as feminine as the concept art. Also, the color scheme is different. Instead of it being red and black, it's an orange and black, so take that as you will. But, you know, eventually this figure did get a release in the Studio Concept series. Now for my overall thoughts on this Widowmaker design, what it could have been, and my general opinions of this canceled Transformer. Personally, I really like it. I think it's just because of how unique it looks. It definitely, I think, if this wasn't, like, maybe in place of Stinger, because to be honest with you, while Stinger was super cool in Age of Extinction, he had, like, no personality. Like, he just was a legit drone. Something for Bumblebee to punch and have a sort of rival with. I feel like looking at Widowmaker's design, she would have had more personality than Stinger and Spades. You know, like I said, maybe she would have had a rivalry with Drift. I could see that happening. And her design, you know, looks very feminine. You know, I think it's really cool the fact that she's a female Transformer, just because there's so few of them in the Michael Bay movies. And I think having another one being kind of a main, like, side villain would have really added to Age of Extinction. I would have changed a few things about her design. I honestly would have made her a little bit bulkier and beefier, kind of like how, what's that Transformer from Bumblebee, the triple changer? She's the female one in that movie. I can't remember her name, but her design was really good in that movie. So I would have made this design along the lines of that one. And I think it would have been really cool. And in terms of my opinions on the toy that got made, I'm a bit mixed. I get why it has to be changed to Widow, you know, that's fine. But I really don't like the color scheme. I wish it would have remained red, because I think the red really adds to the Widow aesthetic, and the black as well. The alt mode's fine. I mean, McLaren is a cool car. I'm not really too picky about it. Just the color scheme, man. I don't like the fact it's orange. I wish they made it red. And that being said, I think this would have been a cool addition if it made it farther in development of Age of Extinction. I think it would have added to, you know, maybe it would have improved that movie only a little bit. I know it's not a popular movie in the Transformers fandom, but, you know, I think it would have definitely improved the quality, at least in my opinion, of the movie just a little bit. It would have gave at least the villains a little bit more personality. I feel like she would have like that character Widowmaker would have been given more to do than Stinger did in the final movie. So yeah, that's my quick thoughts on Widowmaker, the canceled Transformer from Transformers Age of Extinction. Hopefully y'all enjoyed this video. Take it easy, and peace, y'all.